during the trip, I was definitely out of my comfort zone, maybe 70% of this trip because of all different types of reasons. But in the beginning, it was also, can I actually ride a bike that far? And how many kilometers a day can I go? And how many days a week?
So when you get into Chile, the winds completely disappear more or less. You don't have any headwinds, there's no wind. But what you get in that season, that was in March, you get the rainy season. So we swapped the wind. We made a little deal and then we said, there you go, wind. And then we got rain for 3 weeks.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello, I'm your host Bella Malloy, and I'm excited to introduce my guests for today's episode of Seek Travel Ride, Katja and Martin. This Danish couple decided to pack their life into their panniers and go on a bicycle tour which would take 21 months to complete. They set off to cycle the Americas, leaving from Rio Gallegos in Argentina, and their end destination would be Vancouver, Canada, which they reached just a few weeks ago. During this adventure, they would do battle with relentless Patagonian headwinds, cycle across amazing landscapes such as the Salar de Uyuni Salt Desert, and tackle the Peru Great Divide Trail. Of course, they also had endless encounters with amazing people all along the way, pedaling over 22,000 kilometres across 15 countries. I absolutely cannot wait to find out more about their experiences on this amazing trip. Katja and Martin, welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you for that very
much.
nice introduction. We are happy to be on the show.
So happy.
Yeah.
It's always interesting when I actually get together with guests, Martin and Katja, and I think about the adventures that they have, and obviously I do a little summary as an introduction. It really struck me that, and I handwrite this out, sometimes it takes almost a page, because trying to condense a trip like this into a summary, I would say, is almost nigh on impossible. I've listed just a few of the experiences that you would have had on this adventure. I am excited as anything to get into the details of them. But as listeners to the show, a question which I like to ask and start off my podcast with, and I ask this of all my guests, is, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode? So, Katja, you go first. What was the first bike you rode? What's your memory of that?
Well, yeah, so in Denmark, a lot of people ride bikes to school or to work, and we're normally people are like, oh, Denmark is the biking country, and we are brought up with cycles, and everybody cycle. And my first bike was also, I was very small, I think 2 years old or something like that. So I had a pink bicycle. But then actually, I didn't have a bike after that before I was a teenager again. So I'm a little atypical in the Danish biking community. So I had a bike when I was very, very little, and then I didn't have one before I started going to high school.
Far out. My podcast listeners could see my face now, because I've had a previous guest. In fact, it was episode 2, way back at the start of the podcast. It was Dr. Florence Cattell, and she is from France originally, but she was in Denmark doing a lot of her research studies and work there. And she had actually never cycled before as a child, and she learned as an adult. And her comment about the Danes and she had this sort of, not embarrassment, but this sort of thing, complex about it, because she had this view that in Denmark, people know how to ride a bike before they're even born.
Yeah, I think it's true with most people. Yeah.
Yeah.
But for me,
well, you kind of learned very early, right? But you just forgot it a little bit.
And then I forgot a little bit. Then I had to relearn a little bit. But yeah.
Oh, wow.
So you picked up on it right now, right?
I did. Now it's fine. Yeah. Now I can ride a bike.
I bet you could ride a bike quite well. What about you, Martin? What is your memory of the first bike you rode?
It's a great question, because Like I really love cycling. So for me, thinking back and looking back, where did it all start with this bicycle? And I remember my mom had a picture of me. I was probably 1.5 years, and I was sitting on my little 3-wheeled bicycle. And it's like a little bicycle, small white wheels. It was red, and it had a little like a pickup thing behind it, so like you could carry your tool or your toys, and it was very small, and I was there, and it was a Christmas picture, so I had a Christmas fairy hat on, and yeah, so I remember that picture of me. So that must be like my first bicycle. I don't remember it because I was probably 1.5 years old. So that was the first one. But I remember when I got my real bicycle, after I learned to cycle, it was like a mountain bike. It was orange, and I had looked forward for that for years to get my real bicycle. I go wherever I wanted, and it was like a freedom tool for me. So I remember when I got it, I would go to the forest, I would go to the next little village, and I was feeling very free and happy and like independent. So for me, cycling goes with independency. You are very free, and you can go more or less anywhere you want, and that's what we try to do, right? That's the story.
And that term, freedom, independence, where you can go, I was speaking to guests recently that were talking about it's their freedom machine. It's when they first felt they had wings, or it was a way to expand their radius and actually discover new places, discover the world. I mean, Katja and Martin, when I think of what you've discovered on this trip, it's phenomenal. But my guests, and my listeners, should actually know this. So, Martin, this trip that you both did together, cycling the Americas, huge, over 22,000 kilometres. But a little known fact, and maybe this will be a topic for another episode someday in the future. You've done a monumental trip prior to this, Rotterdam to Kathmandu. How many kilometres was this trip? 38,000 kilometres or something like that?
Yeah, I think it ended up, something like that. Roughly counting, I think it ended up being 38,000 kilometres, and it took almost 3 years. So that was a decent trip also, and that's where
a decent trip. What a way to describe it. A little bit understated.
we call this trip the small trip, and his old trip the big trip.
The small trip and the big trip. I like that because the other thing that comes in here is, and I read this on your blog, which was that Martin is the experienced one.
Yeah.
Cannot even fathom the experiences that you had during that previous tour. As I said, I mean, that deserves its actual own podcast episode.
Yeah, that takes more time to go into details of that one. But that's an epic trip as well.
And
so
Bella, that's why I had to also go, because I met Martin almost 5 years ago, and he talked a lot about this trip. So I was like, okay, what is this cycling about? I had to find out, So we started cycling small trips in Denmark, and then I was like, okay, maybe we should go on a long trip.
Yeah.
Maybe I also want to experience this freedom and this, like, all these amazing stories with people we've met, and all these landscapes. So that's how it started with me too. Actually, Martin brought cycling into my life.
Long distance cycling, at least. Yeah.
I can totally see how that would happen, because I must say I feel so privileged with this show, because I get an opportunity to spend a few hours with people and make lifelong friends with guests, and just, sit in my seat but get transported into this sense of wanderlust and travel. And each time I do, when I press stop on my record button and I reflect back on the stories I've just heard and the experiences that have been shared with me, the first thing I'm thinking is, oh my gosh, I want to go there. Oh, wow, I want to go there. And then I sort of think, I wonder, it's just a matter of time, I swear, before I'm going on a massive trip like this.
Yes, you have to. You've been infected by the bug, I guess so, with all these nice stories. And, when we listen to your podcast on the road, because we've done that and we really enjoy that, we get very inspired by your other guests.
Yes.
And we think, oh, wow, this could be a place. So you had a few guests about Saudi Arabia. You had some nice posts about that. So we were like, oh, it sounds interesting to us. So that's how it also develops within the community. And that's how it goes when we meet other cyclists on the road. We talk about, oh, have you been to this place? And this place is really cool, and that road is nice, and there's some people living there. And you kind of share that same feeling through your podcast. And that's very enjoyable that we kind of, within the community of cycling, we have a podcast that's helping us inspire each other. That's cool.
Avec plaisir, as they would say in France. Like it's an absolute joy to be able to share these stories. I guess then, Katja, you were sharing that, you didn't travel on your bike until you were a teenager, despite being Danish. And to be honest with you, in Australia, it's a little bit the other way around. In Australia, you sort of continue riding your bike until you become a teenager and then you sort of stop. And many people, unfortunately, never get back on a bike. And Martin, you've obviously taken these amazing monumental journeys. Like we said, you've cycled a lot further in distances that many people who live in cities would possibly never drive, let's put it that way. Obviously, to do something like what you've done and to continue doing it, in your case, Martin, I get a sense that the outdoors, a sense of curiosity perhaps, or a sense of travel, of learning, of understanding the world, I feel that has to be something deeply rooted in someone to want to go on these type of journeys. That's my assumption. But how did the idea to travel in this way and do these trips, like what were the motivations for both of you there?
Let me start with my little story. I think completely what you're saying, curiosity and a very strong sense of being outside and having this feeling is very strong in me, and it's always been. I think it started with the orange bicycle that I could go into the forest, and soon after I started being I think we call it in English like a Boy Scout, so like doing scouts in Denmark. That's a big thing, and you go into the forest and you stay out there. So that built up my like this lust for being outdoors, and then of course there was some education in Denmark. We have to do compulsory army service. That's also being outdoors, but with a different like aim. But I still enjoyed the outdoors. But yeah, so that kind of built up my story of this. And then I went backpacking as a younger version of me, and I went to Australia and went all around down there. And then I met a very nice guy called Ham from the UK, and we became friends. When we then finished our trips, he went on a cycling trip, and he cycled from the UK to Thailand. And that kind of gave me the seed to say, okay, wow, there's another way to see the world. I followed him along the way. And soon after, I set out on my first own trip, and just within Europe. And then since then, I haven't stopped cycling. So it's definitely curiosity and this great idea of being outdoors and meeting people, engaging in the culture. And the bicycle is just wonderful for all these things. So yeah, I can't live without these trips.
Just what you said, I could just feel it. It sits there so deeply within you. It is you. It is your personality now. And I imagine there's many people who, if I was to say I'm speaking about you, visually they're probably imagining you actually on a bicycle.
I think so too. And it rubs off on you, right?
Yeah, but Katja, something that came up then, in terms of passion for the world and learning and travel, there was a quote that I came up from you was that you personally have this inexhaustible longing, and it came from a trip you took to the US as a 17-year-old.
Yeah, it started back then, yeah. So like Martin, I'm also very curious, and I also had like a very, what do you call it, outside, or I wanted to go out from
a view of the world.
I wanted to experience the world, and it started when I went to high school in the US for a year when I was 17. So I moved away from home as a 17-year-old, and then it just continued. So I took all opportunities I could in my studies and in my life to live abroad. So I've lived in Turkey and Estonia, in the US several times, and then I studied international development and international relations. So I also just have like a interest in the world and in society and politics and everything. So my vision is just a little bit broader than Denmark. I think, I don't know, it becomes a little bit too much maybe, but I think of myself as a world citizen, not as a Danish citizen. Oh, that's like so I'm very happy that I found this way of traveling, because it just gives you such a deep insight. When you go on a bicycle, you just get such a big insight in the communities you go through, and you meet so many more people than you would if you travel in other means. So I'm just very happy to have found this way. Yeah.
You broaden your horizon.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to know, when you do such a big trip like this, like there must be so many things that would broaden your way of thinking and impact on your way of thinking.
Yeah. And I've not even really, I think like coming home, it really shows you how different you've become. Because when you're on a trip for 21 months, of course you notice that you develop and you get some new insights and you get so many impressions. But when you come home to all your old life, and then you're like, okay, maybe I think about things a little bit differently. I think differently about how do I want to live my life? How much should work be of course I want to work, but how should it be a part of my life? And it's just a lot of thoughts that I have to figure out now. Like, how should we live our life? We definitely want to be able to go on these trips. And this is not also my last trip, of course. I mean, I can't imagine living my life and not going out on a trip like this again. So a lot changed,
Experiences learned as well, enriching experiences.
Yeah.
But I guess also, I mean, that's a very positive way of putting it. And don't get me wrong, I can only imagine a trip like this would be enriching. But this is putting my lens on things, knowing the countries that you visited, knowing the poverty that you probably would have witnessed as well.
Yeah.
And devastation in countries. I think there was a village, and I apologise, it's remiss of me to just not remember this now, but I can't remember which country it was in, but where you were there and half of the village had been taken out by a monumental mudslide.
Yeah, that was in Chile.
Yeah.
I thought it was Chile. I was thinking it wasn't Bolivia. I was thinking it was Chile.
It was Chile,
Yeah.
And so we talk candidly about the luxuries of life and the comforts of a home base and what normal was when you come back to your life in Denmark. But when you're in the moment in your tour and you're experiencing those sort of feels and you're witnessing things like that, I imagine whilst it can be enriching from a later perspective, at the time that must feel, I don't know how it would feel to actually sit with those thoughts and to experience those in the moment.
Well, I mean, I think I struggled a lot with it during some parts of our trip. That you just really see your privilege everywhere you go, right? Because you're privileged even to be in that place and experience those things. And having the privilege to be like, okay, I'm here as a visitor, and tomorrow I'll leave, and you'll still be here, and half of your village will still be gone. I think at some point in the trip, I felt a little fatigue. Or I felt like a little, how do you explain it? It was just too much for me. It was, I just
internalized a lot
of it. And I even felt a little bit guilty for being so privileged to just kind of be an outsider. And
I think we also, when we go into places like that, we go in with still the curiosity, but also with a very deep respect for people's lives. And we try to be a very humble guest, and we try to bring some positive insights to what the world still have. And I think that's also, so it broadens our own horizons. But one big thing for me, at least, is also to share. So not only take, but I also want to talk about that, how we live in Denmark, let's say, or the experiences, and especially in a very deep matter in sharing a personal story. So we kind of connect in some way and also support each other. So we try and understand the situation that the people we speak with, they are in. And so we don't just cycle through and just take a picture and say, oh, wow, that's crazy.
Oh, that's terrible.
But we stop there and we try to speak with the people and understand a little bit the history. And this was very unfortunate, like disaster in this village, because they're very far out in the Patagonian way. And so help is far away. So when it's happened in the middle of the night, people were not able to escape. So a lot of people died in the houses, right? And very, very terrible. And this is still there. And left a very deep impact on us. And actually, we have two friends who cycled down there as well, but some years back, and they had a picture from exactly that village, but the house is gone now. Yeah. And so they were in a place.
Wow.
That was
so like very mind blowing to have experienced that our friends were there, and then just a year after, they had this huge mudslide, and a mountain more or less came through the village and took half of the village away. And luckily, not everybody got killed, but a lot of people got killed, sadly. And
stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi everyone, it's me, Bella from the show. I just wanted to let you know about something exciting. I have recently just created a new Facebook group named Seek Travel Ride, where if you are a fan of the show, you can join and we can actually bring this community more to life. It's a place where you can learn more about our guests, see more photos, chat about episodes in more detail, and maybe even pose some questions as well. It's also a place where you can share your own bicycle adventure journeys, whether you've got a photo or a blog or some videos that you want to share. Come online, say hi, join the Facebook group, and let's enjoy this community that we have built. We have a global audience here. People are listening from all around the world, and I think we can only thrive and get an even greater sense of wanderlust by sharing our experiences with each other and connecting. So get onto Facebook. I've provided a link in the show notes and you can join that community as well. Thank you. Now back to the show. That's a deep experience. When you were saying that about the photo, my whole body just got covered in goosebumps just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Again, it's one thing to experience beautiful vistas and amazing environments, and overwhelmingly your trip is filled with positives. But I guess there is some times where you're in situations where, as we said, just the privilege to own a bicycle that you can afford to travel somewhere and take 21 months away from a working life to do something like this.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that's everybody's question is how can you do that? Like, how can you not work for 21 months? Especially like even people from the West or people who are like-minded and actually have the means to do the same, or like you and me, but also people we meet on the way. Like their mind is like, wow, it's not realistic that they can do the same. And that sometimes it makes it a little bit difficult. I just wish everybody could do this,
Yeah.
And
luckily, of course, that's the bicycle again. And I probably return to the bicycle a lot because of all these things, but it's a very flexible way of traveling. So we meet people within a lot of different like levels of society, we can say, who are traveling with bicycle in South America. You have a big society of people cycling. You have the Casa de Ciclistas, that's places where people can stay for free or with a donation, depending on what your means are. And that gives you the possibility to actually go and see your continent. And they have the very cool thing that they can speak with each other. They more or less all speak Spanish or Portuguese, which is not very far away from Spanish. So they have a big community of cycling within countries. And we met many people. Oh yeah, I'm from Colombia, but now we're in Argentina and we work here a little bit. We work in a restaurant. So even that they might not have the same possibilities as us from a European standpoint or Australian standpoint, where we have the ability to work and save up money, because that's a big thing when you can actually work and save your money and not just work to spend them on normal things like food and shelter, because that's how probably 90% of people in the world, they live. That work is just to cover your means of living. That's a big thing. So of course we are very much aware of our privilege and also, but really enjoy that with the bicycle you can go even with less than what we do, maybe, because you can find ways and that you only kind of need to eat and drink, and then you can move yourself within continents, not just going somewhere, but you can actually like move yourself crazy amounts of distance. That's a really cool thing.
I must say, when we talk about crazy amount of distance, I often do this when I'm interviewing guests, and it doesn't matter what adventure they've taken. What I'll do is I get my phone out and I open up Google Maps and I put where they started or where they finished. And then I do this thing where I zoom out or zoom in and then sort of try and get a visual picture of their route. And some people, that route, which was an amazing epic adventure, maybe it was, 500 kilometers, maybe it was 2 weeks, maybe it was 3,000 kilometers. I don't know. Do both of you look at a map and go, wow? Because when Australia is a massive country. It's its own continent. It's huge. As an Australian, I have such an appreciation for large land masses, large distances to traverse. You put Australia next to South America, and it's not so huge.
Yeah.
It's probably a lot fatter.
Well,
but not as high. And then that's just South America. Then you've got Central America, and then you've got North America. The Americas, it's such a large landmass, and it takes a lot of scrolling to actually get it on your phone.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, well, yeah, of course, it's for us, as many others, it's the experiences that counts and all of that. But it is pretty cool to look at a map and see the little line, like the little red line we make, and see that it's just moved all the way from the south of Argentina to Canada. You know, it's pretty incredible to know that you can do this.
Yeah.
I'm thinking if I can do it, most people can do it. And I'm like, I just want to scream at people, actually, you can do it. Everybody can do this. If you set your mind to it, you can do it. So that's, it's incredible to see how it's possible. And I remember in a part of our trip, in the beginning of our trip, maybe down in Patagonia somewhere, I was looking at a map, and I lived in Turkey once, and I really love Turkey. So I was looking at the map, and I did like you did. I put like, oh, can I go from one side of Turkey to the other side? And I was like, oh, that's only going to take me like 1.5 months on a bicycle. Oh, that's nothing. Then I'm like, okay, I can do that.
What you normalize.
Exactly. And normally I would be like, that's impossible, you know? So yeah, it's just, it changes your perspective of distance and time and yeah.
Can I ask a question then? And knowing the areas that you traveled there, like obviously a lot of your travel was, I imagine, on asphalt, on roads, but you obviously took in like the Peru Great Divide. So, you know, this is a sort of a dirt trail if I'm in the majority. Is that correct? Like you're in the mountains.
Deep in the mountains, but we already had when we left home, we said, okay, we want to ride wherever we feel is the right way to go. So we never chose a road because it has a certain surface or whatever. We felt like the way the wind direction is going, that's not completely true because we had a lot of headwind, but let's say in an idea, we just went with what we felt like. So we rode a lot of different roads, but especially when we hit like Central South America, Bolivia and Peru, and when we went up to the Peru Divide, which is amazing scenery, and the roads are actually, you would imagine that they are really terrible, but a lot of them are mining roads. So they are kind of kept a bit, but you get into sections where you have to cross a mountain pass, and then it's not a road anymore. It's just a track. But we had a lot of nice gravel roads and a few single kind of tracks. It was amazing to go up to 5,000 meters and stand up there on a mountain pass, and then you can look as far as you can see, and they are all mountain tops and colors. They are red and blue and purple, and yeah, it's amazing, and snow capped, and yeah, so it's Peru, just like in a scenery wise and also people wise and everything, that blew anything we could have ever imagined.
Wow, because my question was going to be, how technical did some of these roads get? Because for me, a lot of my listeners, they get in touch saying they're in training for a trip. And, you know, they're taking inspiration from hearing from people because they want to be able to be fit enough to do something like this one day. And there's a part of me that goes, awesome, that's so cool. You're training towards something. It's great to be motivated to get to line up and do that. And then there's another part of me that knows that often when I've lined up to do just even my tours, I've not been the fittest version of Bella at that time. But you do just build cycle touring fitness. It might mean the first few days are a struggle, or you don't go as far, or you can't go as fast, but you can generally keep going as long as you eat and drink.
Yeah.
But what about from a technical point of view? Were there times, Katja, for example, say when you're not on the beautiful, smooth, mining roads and you're on those single tracks, were there times where you're like, oh, this is a little bit out of my comfort zone, like, or is this something that you genuinely feel anybody who can, if you can ride a bike, you can do this?
Well, yeah, Peru Divide, I would say probably yes. But the thing is, we started out like, so I didn't have a lot of experience traveling by bicycle when we left. We just had like a 3 weeks trip to Switzerland because I needed to see, do I like even like biking up mountains? And if I don't like that, maybe we shouldn't go to the Andes Mountains, you know? Yeah. So I found out I love that. That's fine. Let's do it. But during the trip, I was definitely out of my comfort zone, maybe 70% of this trip because of all different types of reasons. But in the beginning, it was also, can I actually ride a bike that far? And how many kilometers a day can I go? And how many days a week? And so we started out really slowly. So we just kind of took our time, also because there was a lot of headwind. So it was not that easy to go fast. But we also took our time, and we had the privilege to take our time because we had such a long journey ahead. So Like we had almost 2 years, so we were like, okay, we'll just take a rest day every 4th day if that's what we need, or we will just stay here for 2 days because we need to rest. So I just kind of got into it very softly.
Kind of
softly, because it wasn't so soft because of like the crazy wind.
Crazy wind from like day one, right? Like I don't think you even got like...
Yeah, exactly.
We're not just talking about a pesty headwind which sort of like eats away at you slowly all day. I'm picturing winds that you potentially have to get off and hold everything in your might not to fall over, to not get blown off the road.
Yeah.
You may have even...
Well, yeah, we did get blown off the road quite a bit. And also in like the first day, we only go 40 kilometers and it took us the whole day, like 8-10 hours, because we're just cycling 5 kilometers an hour against the headwind. And I was like, if this is how it's going to be, then I'm not sure this is something I want to do. Yeah. But yeah, the thing is, like, we started off slowly building up, and then we took some challenges. So down in Argentina, we took like a little more remote trail into the mountain road where it was just like kind of sandy roads and stuff, but it was just to kind of build up on my endurance and build up on my confidence. I think actually that was the most important part. I had to be confident that I could actually like go up in the mountains. So before we came to Peru, I had already done a lot of these small like trips. That
small
kinda,
in the sense of small, but still like 4 days, 5 days on with all our food and water on the bike. So we kind of built that up. Yeah, I think that's what Katja is also explaining. And we in Argentina, northern Argentina, we already went up to 4,800 meters. And so we had a lot of, like, say, build up this confidence and teamwork to understand how to be on this road. So that would also be, so if your listeners are like wondering, can I do the Peru Divide? So I would say it's good to get a little bit of experience on your bike, on dirt trails and on steep descents and long ascents going up, because you go from 2,000 meters up to 5,000 meters. Yeah. So it's some crazy amount of altitude you're building up there. So, but all these things, they come. So Katja talk about it normalized now. That's what I'm also a little bit, but you build up the confidence and it becomes second nature that we are out there. But Peru Divide is a rough trail. There's not a lot of supplies. You need to carry your food. You need to, so for this experience, you need to practice a little bit or read up on it. I wouldn't just say, just go and do it and be naive. You should have a little bit of comfort in yourself and believe that. But when that's said, I would say if you want to do it, you can do it and then just prepare for it. And that's the key for this kind of things, is you need to prepare a little bit. But the training, yes, if you want to do the Peru Divide only, you should train a bit. But if you want to do a long ride like this, don't worry about training. That will happen along the way. Yeah. Just take it slowly, like what Katja was explaining. You build it up. Yeah, exactly.
Katja, hearing you say, you know, in a way you needed your own inner confidence and your own self-belief to know in your mind that it's possible, so that you could keep going. And I guess, Martin, is that where, as a couple, you have the advantage of drawing on the experience from the big one, the big tour, and to sort of, I guess, in your mind, you're also cognizant of the type of things that probably are going to be facing you. You've been in areas of high altitude before. You've been in remote places before. You've most likely had to have a heavy laden bike for days and days before. And so these are the things that you're thinking about, you know, the master and the apprentice, so to speak. I don't mean it that way. I believe you're equals in this couple. Putting that out there.
Yeah, of course.
We are equals and we look at each other as equals, but of course we have different experiences. So that's just on an experience point of view that I had let's say a few panniers extra of experiences that I could share with Katja, and we did that along the way. And we were like, okay, now we move a task from me that I was normally doing. Now it's Katja take it over a little bit, the navigation, the using the stove, all these kind of things. So slowly we build up the confidence and the understanding on what do we need to, let's say, survive is a big word, but to sustain ourselves on a long journey like this. But for sure, there was this level of sharing some experience. And then we had to learn to work as a team, because we are different persons. So we have to find where we're comfortable and where do we have our challenges. And we support each other a lot in that also.
Yeah, it was actually a challenge to be this far apart in experience, because it was easy for me to maybe step a little bit back and just let Martin do a lot of the practical things in the beginning, because it was already so many impressions that I had to take in, just being on the trip and sleeping outdoors and having to find a place to wild camp and having to do all these things. And Martins have done those things like 1,000 times before. We had to like find a way where we were both comfortable, and I had to maybe be a little more out of my comfort zone so Martin didn't get too bored.
No, I don't think that's true.
But
we had to push your comfort zone a little bit in order to do a journey like this. There is a certain extent of discomfort, right? So, but you get used to it, and then it becomes your normal, and then it's comfortable to be there. But you have to push away from normal life a little bit. So there's no couch every night to sit and watch TV. So you start there, and then we build it up, right?
Yeah. But I think we did it very well.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's just, it was just like a theme in the beginning of our trip that, we had to figure out this like imbalance in experience.
I imagine conversely there would have been days where, just from a physical element point of view, or even mentally, that you would have felt awesome and happy, and Martin, you would have been potentially going through a downer, because it doesn't matter how much experience you also have the experience of knowing that not every day you're going to be happy as anything and enjoying the moment. There's going to be days of struggle or sickness. So
that's true.
I imagine, Katja, there were moments where Martin was very thankful that you were there to help lift him up, and perhaps he was looking at you with the mind of, oh gosh, look at where you are today, and I'm just so. Whilst you started as the inexperienced one on this trip, for sure, I think that would have changed so much dynamically as the kilometers and as your little bike trail made its way up the Americas.
Yeah, for sure. No. Anyhow, that's a great part of being together as a couple on a trip, is that we, of course, have days where I'm completely down with either my thoughts or physically or ill or whatever, and then Katja has to bring it up a little bit, or it's the opposite. And that definitely very fast became very much an equal game, because that's not really based on experience. Sometimes it is, but it's more like just sometimes you're not in your fittest state, right? And then you work as a team. But the positive of this is that you have the team and you can help each other, but you can also share the experiences. So now we can sit here in a couch and look at each other and say, oh, do you remember when you were doing this or whatever? And that's really nice, being together and sharing that experience. So we try to help each other as much as we can.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's just also we help each other in the way that we can. So maybe Martin can help me more in the practical things, but I can help him more with maybe sorting out his thoughts about things.
We have our own like places where we know you're a bit stronger than me, or I'm a bit more practical with stuff. So we find we already knew that a bit beforehand, but on a trip like this, it becomes magnified. You take a glass out and you magnify everything, because the weather, the situation, the food, your illness, you eat something and then your stomach just turns bad. Or we were away during COVID, so there was still a COVID thing. We just went on the back end of COVID, right? So there's a lot of places we had to wear masks, or certifications of vaccinations, and all these kind of things were still a thing back then. So, and I got hit by probably COVID at some point in Argentina, and we were out way out in a little nowhere. We had slept in a small, not a church, but it's like a shrine where they had like a saint, and we put our tent up in there. And then I woke up in the morning with a headache and a high fever, and we had to cycle 40 kilometers to the next little village against the wind. And we were battling against the wind, and I was feeling so down, and Katja was cycling in front and protecting me for the wind. And then we arrived to the village, and there was nothing in the village where we could stay. There was a little shop, and they have very little out there, but luckily the people, and that's again the beauty of people around. We found a lady, and she had built a new house, and she still had her old house, and there was a really old house, probably from the way beginning of the village. It was a mud brick house and very moist and humid, but she said, you can stay here and pay me a little bit of money. And we ended up staying a week, and Katja had to cook for me while I was in bed, lying there with fever and chills. And so these situations, they do happen. And then it's just like we are very fortunate to have each other, that we can help each other, right?
I'm just trying to put myself in that situation, like being on a bicycle to a feeling, as we would say in Australia, sick as a dog, and just having to pedal forward into a raging headwind.
Because
Feverish.
we weren't able to just stop because we didn't have enough food and there weren't any water out there. It was like a deserty landscape, and it's difficult.
Yeah, in the moment it would be a nightmare. I guess only say this in reflecting back, but I guess the simple thing is there's no decisions to make because there is no alternative. You have to keep going forward.
Yeah.
Far out.
Definitely.
We talked about COVID there, and I think it's fair to talk about this now as well. We've talked about the raging headwinds you faced. There's a reason why the overwhelming majority of bicycle travellers travel from north to south when they're doing this trip.
Yeah.
A trip this big, you're obviously going to have a days of headwinds, whichever direction you're taking it on. But the prevailing winds are definitely prevailing for a reason.
Yeah.
You took the decision to go from south to north.
Yeah.
That was a timing thing as well, wasn't it?
It was primarily a timing thing, actually, because we were ready to go and we didn't want to wait 5 more months. So we decided to do this trip in, I think it was April, and then we were thinking, okay, we can leave in January, and we didn't want to wait the 5 months more you have to wait for summer in Canada. So that's primarily it. And then we had a couple of friends from Denmark who have done the same.
South to north.
They also did it south to north, and they were like, it's doable.
This is a Danish thing?
Yeah.
It's a Danish way to do it. You didn't know that?
I should just ask this actually. This is an assumption of mine that most people go north to south. Is that right? Or have I actually got it wrong?
No, it's true.
That's correct.
We met so many going the different direction than us.
Yeah.
So that's true. And I do understand it because it is tough. But then again, I mean, it was only like a month out of,
the 21 months.
21 months.
Only 1 month of 5 kilometers per hour bicycle travel.
Exactly. So I mean, in the long term, it's not such a big problem. But I understand if you're going for 3 months or something, I understand that you don't want to battle a headwind for a month, So
yeah, on balance.
Yeah, we were a bit jealous when we met people coming from the north going south, they just flew past us. And we were
they were like, "Oh, what a great
day it is today."
We were like, "Yeah,
enjoy that tailwind."
Oh, I could just imagine. I mean, I've had that passing strangers just in normal winds or wherever I've been.
Yeah.
When you're on fire with a tailwind. What is the theory? There's no such thing as a tailwind. There's just good form. You're just going faster. But when you see someone coming the other way, my heart just drops for them. Like,
exactly.
Glad I'm not them.
Yeah, that was us.
What I wanted to also point out there was, because COVID, whilst it didn't change when you left, it did change a few things, and that would have been the start point of your route. Now, most people taking on this route start off at the very, very bottom, as far south as you can go, Ushuaia.
Yeah.
But you couldn't do that because Chile was out of bounds when you started.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's correct.
And that's also have a connection with the wind, because we had more wind because we stayed in Argentina than we would have had probably in Chile going in. Yeah, so we weren't preparing for all of this wind.
No, we actually made that change very quickly, because back then, that was in the end of 2021, right? So then things were moving with borders opening and all this. So we still had back in December 2021, we still had our ticket to Ushuaia. Yeah. And we were still hoping, fingers crossed, Chile had made some statements of opening their borders, but then we were getting too close. And 3 weeks before we left on the 4th of January 2022, we decided, okay, we can't take the chance to fly to Ushuaia, because imagine if we are stuck down there, we have to fly out again somewhere or whatever. Yeah. So we looked at the map, and where is the furthest southern airport in Argentina, and actually it's Rio Gallegos, which is a small town / city in those kinds. They're just on the border with Chile, and so we flew down there for that reason, because we wanted to start in Ushuaia. That's where you normally start on a tour like this. But COVID kind of put a little bit of a branch in our wheel, and we just settled up and said, okay, that's just how we deal with it. It's still hurting us a little, because when we say we started southern Argentina, people say, oh, you started in Ushuaia. And then we have to explain exactly what we just did. Oh, due to COVID, we couldn't do it. And then afterwards, we learned that there was actually a bus connecting from Argentina to Argentina through Chile. So we could have probably gotten on that bus, but we didn't have this information beforehand. So we just had to deal with the situation. And then luckily Argentina let us in, because that was the other question. Maybe they won't let us in. You don't know when you arrive in COVID times. And we had our certificates and all this planned out and did all the registrations we needed to. And it was very easy, actually. They didn't check anything. They just said, yeah, have a good time in Argentina. And that was good. So yeah, but crossing back into Chile, we had a lot of issues with COVID. Chile was very tough on it. And in the beginning, they just opened 3 borders through the whole range. They have 5,000 kilometers of border with Argentina. And luckily, one of them were halfway in Patagonia. We could go into Chile and enjoy the beautiful Carretera Austral, which is a beautiful area. And so, yeah, so COVID was still a bit of a challenge. Followed us a bit, but luckily now we deal with it, right? And it's not a big pandemic anymore.
When you were mentioning the Carretera Austral, when you first started out, it wasn't even a certainty that you'd get to see any of that, was it?
No.
Yeah, we didn't know. It was just a few weeks before we were there, we found out that they will probably open the border, and then they did. So,
and then you made tracks for it straight away.
Yeah.
Was it Road 40 or Road 41 in Argentina, which is
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Actually, quickly to my listeners, I will mention here, Katja and Martin have an amazing website and a blog that's filled with photos of this trip, and I would encourage you to seek that out. I'll put a link in the show notes, but just quickly, the web address for your blog, it is
americasbybike.dk.
americasbybike.dk.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's blog post 1 or blog post 2. There's a photo of the road and it's just corrugated. It's horrible. It's not the Carretera Austral.
No, that was what I was talking about earlier, actually. That was like one of the first challenges for me on the bike, like the real challenges apart from the wind. Those sandy washboard roads, that was just 300 kilometers of those, and then also the headwind. So it was just,
it's a good starting point. But then we made it into Chile, and we were really heading to Chile because the headwinds were grueling. And we know that on the other side of the Andes Mountains, so that's on the western side of the Andes Mountains, the winds are not as strong. So when you get into Chile, the winds completely disappear more or less. You don't have any headwinds. There's no wind. But what you get in that season, that was in March, you get the rainy season. So we swapped the wind. We made a little deal, and then we said, there you go, wind. And then we got rain for 3 weeks. so we
still enjoyed it a lot.
We still had a great time.
It's all the extremes, because the other thing that happened when you first set out is not only did you have the wind, but you got sunburnt.
Yeah.
Then you also had real cold weather. And I imagine, we were talking about when you were on the Peru Divide, up to 5,000 meters, but where you were camping as well in high elevation, you would have been freezing, I imagine, as well.
Yeah, we had some cold nights.
We had some cold nights, but the worst weren't actually in Peru. It was in Argentina, going from Argentina to Chile in the north of both countries. And Paso Hama, it's called. I think people will maybe know if they cycled there. But we had nights down to minus 20 degrees.
Yeah, Celsius.
Sorry, did you say minus 20 degrees? Sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
Minus 20.
Yeah, exactly.
20, yeah. So that was the coldest night.
That was the coldest we had. So we had a lot of cold nights, but those were cold.
Guaranteed I've got some Canadians listening to this show.
Yeah, they don't mind.
No, often Canadians go, oh yeah, whatever, that's not. How do you keep warm? All you can do is put every single thing that you've got on and use each other's body warmth. What other techniques are there?
Yeah, well, so heating up some hot water and putting it in the bottle, and then taking the bottle down with you in the sleeping bag.
But we carry 2 sleeping bags, actually. Yeah. So that's a little trick maybe for other people going on long tours. I think for a shorter trip, it's not a big thing. But because we go through all these climates that we've talked about now already, we've had cold and warmth and all this. So we have almost a 4-season sleeping bag, which it goes down to I think minus 10 or 8, something like that. And then we have a summer sleeping bag, which is just down to 2-3 degrees. But when you combine these two, we're pretty good well off. But that also gives us flexibility through the season, so we can sleep well, because we really appreciate our sleep. So that system of having 2, like a layered sleeping system, and it's down sleeping bags, and it's like the heavy one is 700 grams and the light one is 200 grams. So it's not It's not a big thing to carry, but I think now it's a good way to do it. Like a quilt, the summer one, so it doesn't have a back, so it's more like a blanket kind of style, and then a good sleeping mattress. So that's rule number one. All the cold is coming from the ground, more or less. So if you don't have a good sleeping mattress, you can put all the sleeping bags you want on top of you, but you will feel the cold from the ground. That's how we keep warm. So the sleeping system we kind of worked on a little bit, and then when it's really cold, we need to put a little bit of extra clothing on to jump into the sleeping bag, our down jacket on if we need it, and then an Nalgene bottle with boiled water in, and then wrap some clothing around it so you don't burn yourself, and then put it down in your sleeping bag, and then we'll stay kind of warm.
That's such a cool tip. In fact, I think it was Mackenzie Barney, and she rode, again, through South America.
Yeah.
And she was the first one I asked her about the cold, and she had said about a hot water bottle. I thought, I've never thought of that. Now, admittedly, I've had some cold overnight camps, but maybe -4, maybe -5, which is not -20. But once you're cold, you're cold. It sort of becomes irrelevant. If you're cold, that's what matters. What a great trip. Because I want to actually reflect then quickly. If I wind back, you made the decision to take this trip on. You know you're going to be away for so long. Gear decisions and what you take with you become very important then, especially when you're going to be traversing such extreme environments. You mentioned there, Martin, the wisdom in taking 2 sleeping bags. What other sort of things did you consider for this trip, knowing the details of the route and where it was going to take you, the places you were hoping to see? Like when you're dealing with remote places, were there stuff you took on this route that you took on it because of the length of the journey and the extremes, or apart from 2 sleeping bags, is everything the same?
Oh, it's a really good question. I think we've spent a lot of, especially me, I like going through the details of our gear, and we also, there's one is the length of the journey. Another thing is where do you want to have your comfort. So you can go very lightweight, but that usually goes against your comfort. With the 2 sleeping bags, we get a bit more sleeping comfort. But if you would only have one, you would maybe have some cold nights, but you would carry less. So it's always a balance of weight, comfort, and practicality of the route. So with a long route like this, we knew that we would have warm weather, cold weather, rain weather, snowy weather, and all these environmental things that we need to take care of. So we needed to carry it all, let's say. So we had a very warm jacket. We also have a wind jacket. We have a rain jacket. And so all these things, we try to find the best of both worlds, weight and comfort, and then going a little bit more for weight. So we are not the lightest one. So if you see the pictures of us, we have the standard set of panniers in the front, back, and a bag on top of the back one. So we carried a little bit more than what most people maybe do nowadays. I don't know, but a little bit more. But that gives us the comfort and the possibility to carry a lot of food and water. But one thing I would say for a long journey like this is a multi-fuel stove that you can more or less burn whatever fuel you can find. So if it's gas or petrol or diesel, but we mainly use petrol because in most places people have a car or a motorbike or a scooter or something like that, and they run on petrol. So if they have petrol, we have fuel for cooking, and then we are happy. So we carry that, and you need to learn a little bit how to use it. So I would recommend practicing a little bit with it. But that's one of the best things we have in our bags. That's our petrol stove, because it runs even in 5,000 meters so it's just a bulletproof stove.
And then if you've got fuel in a stove, you've got a way to generate heat, but you've also got a way to purify water if you need to purify water as well. Did you have another water purification? Like, was that the way that you did purify water, just boiling it? Or did you have another device, or like a purification straw or water filter or things like that as well, or tablets?
We had it all.
Okay. Well, it's a long trip. Take it all.
We did have a water purifier, and tablets, and of course we boiled also sometimes the water. Yeah. So
we don't think we've ever had any problems with the water from the filtering of rivers and streams and all this, but we don't really know. But mainly the times we've had some issues with the stomach has been in cities where we've probably had a salad or something like that. Then pay a very high price for that. But with the purifying, filter is nice because it's kind of safe. it takes a little bit of weight, but it's nice to have a filter so you can. And we also had some problems with it actually because it's a mechanical filter. Some of it broke, so we bought one of the squeeze through from, I can't remember what they're called, Sawyer, I think. But that's just like a little filter that's very easy, and that's a nice backup also. So you always have a backup filter your water.
That makes sense. It's a vital thing. It's a backup, but also if you don't have it and you need it, and you need to rely on it, water is one of our most primal needs.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that makes sense. Okay, let's delve into some of the experiences on this trip.
Yeah.
I mentioned in my introduction, I was mentioning amazing landscapes, and I want to point out, I think I've spoken about it already, but when I research the trips that my guests have taken and I trawl through posts or I look on a map or I learn about the areas myself, often I'm sort of making notes of, it's this mountain range or this body of water or, this sort of site. Something that sort of blew my mind was I think you actually encountered possibly nearly every sort of type of geographical feature in the world. And what I mean by that is there was, I think I had it written down, but I'm just going to try and rattle them off and see if I've missed anything. So you've got a mountain range, the Andes there.
Yeah.
You've got deserts. You had the salt desert, the Salar de Uyuni. And would I be right to say you had a sand desert in the US as well?
We had
like northern Mexico, right?
Couple
there we go. You got two types of deserts.
The Atacama Desert in Chile.
Plains and, a step of flat land there. You've got that.
Yeah.
I imagine you had views of glaciers at some point.
Yeah, both in Chile and...
high mountains. Waterfalls are obviously there. Lake Titicaca, so lakes.
Yes.
You have got the amazing Amazon River, which
Yes.
also means you went through the Amazon jungle.
Yes.
I think you had, let me think here, in Ecuador, was it, that you had wild camp with views of the volcano? Is it Cotopaxi National Park?
Ecuador, Bolivia.
Yeah. And
beaches, no doubt, in Central America.
Yeah.
What have I missed?
I'm not sure. We had beaches also there, nice to mention. So we had, you said beaches, sorry, but the Caribbean. I don't think we missed anything.
Rolling countryside? Forest,
rolling road.
Yeah. Wow.
Pine forest up in Northern America. And so we had beautiful sceneries all the way. Yeah.
It's amazing because I don't think there's many trips that people would take that would take in all of it.
That's the cool part about the Americas is you go either north to south or south to north. That's irrelevant in that case, but you go through a lot of climates and that way of the globe, whereas if you go east to west or west to east, depending, you kind of stay more or less in the same climate zone. It changes a little bit. But you get a lot more diversity because you go north to south, more or less on the globe. So that's the cool part of it,
So I'm going to ask you some questions about some of these places. And I should just shout out now to my listeners now. I am focusing this podcast a lot on the South American experiences that Martin and Katja had, purely because this is such a big trip that to try and have experiences through every single country and both continents and it would just do a disservice to them. So I'm just putting that out there now. And we're going to talk about some of these amazing geographical places. But something that I saw a post of, and it was actually a photo that I saw, and it was a photo that stirred up my senses, was a photo you had of a Bolivian market, and it was a photo series, and it was like, and to me it was like, that's a full-on sensory cultural experience. And so what I wanted was, instead of the typical tell me about the Andes or tell me about wild camping in the volcano and did you see a snake in the jungle, what I want to know is tell to me about what is a typical Bolivian market experience. You were to say, Bella, I'm going to transport you like a genie and you're going to land in this market, what would you tell me to expect to experience there?
That's a great question. And I think we will take you to Uyuni. So it's a town, or it's a city in Bolivia that's very close to the salt flats. So the Salar de Uyuni, the biggest salt flat of the world. But in Uyuni, they have huge markets. And a lot of people from the nearest towns, they come to this market and everyone have their little stall on the street. So they just put out a blanket on the road and then they have their vegetables or their spices and meats and technology and pans and pots and clothes and shoes. And you can they have different sections of these markets, so you can buy anything you want there, and you just have to find the electronic section or the shoe section or the clothes section or the spices section or the food section. So it's incredible. And then they have things that are not normal to us in Denmark.
So they believe in Pachamama, which is the Mother Earth. So they still practice that. That's a ancient belief. I don't think it's a religion, but it's definitely a very strong belief, and it probably goes before the Incas came and all this. So they have a lot of beliefs with the Pachamama that you need to offer her good stuff. So they burn things and offer her for the goodness and the belief. So you find in the market all these things that you burn and you offer to Pachamama, but you also have people with experience like shamans or like witches, and they sit there and they do fortune telling. And so when you walk into this market, you walk into smells. Your vision is exploding because everything is purple, red, yellow, blue. There's a lot of, and the clothing, the people in Bolivia, they wear traditional clothing, which are very beautiful. And they have, the women, they wear small shoes, they have a small bowler hat on, and they are laughing at you. Big skirts.
Colorful skirts.
Bright colors too.
Yeah, bright colors.
The witches, they often have like small glasses with snakes or scorpions or some like different things that you can drink
or dried or cook.
It's medicine. And also you go and then you see like there's a big pile of llama fur in the corner, and then they sell the wool from the llama, but they don't sell it. It's not like treated. It's just like there. It's just like taking off the llama and then they put it in the pile.
So it's more like a whole llama lying there. It's just all the fur.
Yeah, you can buy that, and it's just so amazing to walk around.
And then they're cooking food, so they're frying llama or they're making soup. They love the soup and the potatoes. You can find more potatoes than you can ever imagine. Bolivia, I think, I don't know the number, but it's in thousands of different kinds of potatoes. So you can find the small purple and the biggest one that's black and everything in between, and long and round and bumpy. And the potatoes is a huge thing, and they dry them, freeze dry them, ferment them. You can get potatoes as you want, and they make great French fries also. So that's a good.
Oh, yum! Straight from my heart. Do they have them with mayo though? Is it mayonnaise?
Yes, with mayo you can do it.
You get
and
that.
then we had in the uni we stayed some days, and we had like our favorite little spot to go and get some fried chicken and some potatoes, and that was just a lady and her little daughter and her mother that was standing in that shop, and they just made fried chicken all day long. And
more or less grilled chicken fried.
Grilled chicken.
That's the full-on experience when you arrive in the Bolivian market, but it's wonderful, and they are very kind people, and they are curious, and they are laughing, and they make small jokes, especially because we are Danish. We're a little bit taller than the Andean kind of normal height of people. So they look at us and they're looking at our legs and feet, and they are laughing.
They will just laugh at us. And we think that's so amazing because they just kind of like just burst out laughing when they look at us. They think we look so funny because we're tall, as Martin said, like long blonde hair, and it's just different from what they're used to. So they think we're funny. And I just love that they're not like hiding it. They just
calling us the tall ones. So
Oh, it would be such a beautiful experience because, and the reason I asked you with that is, as someone who's curious about the world, I hear about tales of Morocco and the markets in Marrakesh, and I dream about smelling the spices and a bazaar in Turkey and things like that. But this Bolivian marketplace, I think it's a new goal, a new bucket list of mine. I need to go and experience the market at Uyuni. It just sounds absolutely amazing. And the fact that I can get there and have multiple different types of potato is just straight to this food lover's soul. Yum! I love the comment of the culture of the people too. Did you have a comprehension of this market before you got there? Like, how much research, even more broader than just the market, how much research did you do about the trip in terms of places you wanted to go? Were there expectations that, I can't wait to see the markets in Bolivia, or was this a brand new unexpected experience?
I think the markets in Bolivia were a great surprise.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
No, I think in the broad perspective, it became Rio Gallegos and then Vancouver. That was the points on our journey we had planned, more or less. No, we had a few other points. We knew Machu Picchu in Peru. We wanted to go there because it's famous, and
Salar de Uyuni.
and Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia. And then also we went to the Galapagos Islands from Ecuador. And those were like milestones kind of thing in the whole trip. But then from a research point of view, we are doing that along the way. So we speak with people, we research, and we read up on the internet about places, but we don't, beforehand, we didn't research deeply. We had a like high level understanding of cultures and what we would expect. And Bolivia was one of the places we both were looking really much forward to, because it's in the middle of everything. It's still very traditional. It has a high level of indigenous people. And so the culture is really kind of preserved from a South American perspective. You find indigenous people in a lot of places still, but Bolivia still has a strong sense of this. And we knew in Bolivia would be very different from everything else, because you also meet people who don't speak Spanish. So we've been used to that during the journey, that in Argentina and Chile, most people, they speak Spanish, even as the second language sometimes, but mainly as a first language. But in Bolivia, you can go on. This also happened in Peru. You go out in the mountains or the villages, and you hear around you that they don't speak Spanish. And some of the people who are maybe a little bit of an older generation, they don't have a strong, or maybe not a wish to speak Spanish. It can be both, I think. But yeah, so that changed also.
Yeah, so they speak Quechua.
I was going to say, what do they speak? And this is like, this is totally ignorant of this. I just had this assumption that it was Spanish. So is it an indigenous language, or what is the language that they speak there?
No, they have a lot of languages.
But the largest majority of the indigenous people speak something called Quechua.
Which is Quechua is probably before the Incas also, but the Incas kind of took ownership of the Quechua and brought out the Quechua to the empire of the Incas, which was a huge empire. So that was more or less the whole part of South America, from all the way south near Mendoza in Argentina and all the way up to Colombia. That was Inca rule. So that was a pretty amazing, massive. Yeah. So they left, of course, some trails and the Inca trails, by the way, but also culture-wise and stuff like that. And you still find that back, and of course the language. So you get in South America, when you're out in the villages, it's more indigenous, and people don't speak Spanish because they don't need it out there.
And so then how did you get along in those moments? Because I know that you had it as a goal to try and be fluent, or obviously very comfortable with speaking Spanish by the end of this trip. And we don't need to have university level fluency here. Getting by from day to day as a bicycle traveller is what you want. And I guess a level of understanding of a language where you can try and have some form of a conversation with the people you meet. Does Google Translate even come up with any of these indigenous languages? Like how do you communicate? How are you getting an understanding of a conversation to try
usually to take when place? We are out there where the language is an indigenous language, we have that not a lot, because let's say majority of people speak Spanish in South America, so it's not a common thing to find a non-Spanish speaker, but it can happen. But in that situation, we are usually that far away that Google Translate has no signal anyhow. So
of course,
put that in the pocket and forget about that, and then it becomes simple sign language, right? So we are usually happy to meet each other as humans. So they're curious, why did you come here with a bicycle? And they're laughing at us, or we share a little bit. Yeah, we came from something. We try and say some words, and then it becomes just like we need to drink. We can make a sign language for to drink or to eat or to sleep or try and make a sign to go to the toilet if we need to do that. But like universal human sign language, which are just basic needs that we all have, and that works.
You travel with a sense of curiosity, but something that comes across whenever I interview guests who've traveled in this way is there is such an amazing curiosity from the strangers that you meet along the way as well, and they're curious about your way of travel. It struck me many times that some of my guests that have gone on big trips went on them when they first saw a bike traveller, and the thing that they said was, I didn't even know you could do that. But I imagine now there are places in South America that you go, Carretera Austral, there's places where they would see bicycle tourists quite often.
Yeah.
I don't know that they have bicycle tourist fatigue, but you're not necessarily unique to them. But conversely, I imagine with your route, you went off the beaten path a bit, and you're seeing people who possibly haven't seen people travel in this way.
Yeah, that's been the case. And I just thought of one of those cases when you said this about speaking to people, because our Spanish it's not the perfect Spanish, but we can speak, like
Now we
can make a small conversation. But in Peru, we met when we were going cycling down from the mountains into the Amazon area, like in the high Amazons, it's called, like where it's still a little mountainy, but not completely jungle lit, but it's like the transition to the jungle. We met a woman called Doris, and we stayed with her, and we talked with her a whole night and a whole morning, even if we didn't have like a
complete Spanish fluency.
Like a very good level of Spanish at that point. We still, like, we found a way to talk also without Google Translate, and of course helped that she was also very interested and curious about us. So she was willing to talk a lot or try to understand, which is always helpful.
So curious about us, and we were putting up the tent in her. She had a little, not a restaurant, but a little eating area for the people around, and we could put our tent up there. And she was with her daughter, were looking at us putting up the tent and all the poles and all this. And for them, it's a very foreign object, a tent, because a tent, we don't have a tent. There's a Spanish word for it, but people usually don't imagine that this is what's coming out of our bag. It's a nylon thing with aluminium poles, and it looks kind of high tech, right? So people are very curious about, that's an interesting thing, and can we look inside, and do you sleep in here? And it was a very nice experience to share that.
The cool thing about people who travel slowly through a country on a bicycle is that they're meeting strangers in that country that have just this wow, like, and you have these moments with people as well, and you sparked a curiosity in them too, which is so cool. I love it. Something I also noted about your trip, which I thought was great, you took time away from traveling day by day by bicycle. You would go to a destination and you would actually put the bikes away, and you would put some hiking packs on, and you would actually go hiking. Is it because hiking is something that you have a passion for as well, or was it something where you consciously knew that you would need time off the bikes on a trip this long as well?
Yeah, so I think it's a mixture of all of these things. So obviously on a bicycle trip this long, it's, for us at least, it's important to sometimes take some breaks and do something else. And we've done that either hiking or maybe just staying in a city or exploring in some other ways. And sometimes we had friends visiting. But the hiking, it's both because it would be nice with a break sometimes from the bike, but it's mostly because we also really love to hike. Yes. And that was an important part of we haven't done it as much as we would have liked, but in South America, we were pretty good at putting the bikes and going for a hike, because it's that the nature is so beautiful that it just tickles in your hiking boots. Yeah. And we actually, like, we arranged a setup on the bike. So we had a backpack that we could go with. So on the back of our bikes, we have a backpack that we can go hiking with for up to 6 days, with food and water and everything in our tent. And so we can be self-sustainable in a hike too. Yeah. So that was very important for us to have this possibility if we wanted to take it. Yeah.
So in a way, when we were talking before how you didn't have preconceptions and certain plans about the route, did you have hikes in mind that you knew you wanted to definitely do? Like, we talked about Machu Picchu there, and, being in that moment, that's an obvious one.
Yeah.
But did you study it enough and go, we're going to go hiking here? Or was that a happenstance moment where you go, wow, what a place, let's spend a few days here and go hiking?
We prepared for it beforehand, that we knew that we wanted to take some hikes. We didn't know exactly when and where and how, but we did make the setup, as Katja explained, with a backpack. And then we have all the other stuff, right? The things you need for cycle touring and hiking are more or less equal weight and all these things. So you just need a backpack to put them in. And then what we also do is we cycle with normal mid-sized boots. So they are hiking boots in a sense. So we can jump off the bike and go for a walk if we want to. We are not connected into the bikes. We have flat pedals, and that makes us a flexible kind of thing. And so we had hoped to hike down in Chile. That was initially the big hike because there's a place called Torres del Paine. That's a mountainous area down in the Patagonia in Chile, and we knew that there's some beautiful hikes down there. But as things developed, we could see that plan was pushed out because of COVID, what we were talking about. But then we saw that there's another beautiful place down in Argentina, which is called the Fitzroys. I knew about this mountain because it's a very beautiful mountain, and
it's an iconic mountain.
Iconic
right?
mountain.
So if you think about, if you want to draw a mountain, you would draw something like the Fitzroy, with these jagged
like tops,
mountain tops and snow. And,
That hike, it was going to be a 7-day hike, I think.
Yeah.
But the weather shortened it for you. But notwithstanding that, it required some interesting river crossings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was looking through your photos when I was researching this, and I saw a photo, I think it's of you, Katja, on the rope, hauling along. And I was just thinking, there's moments where I see where my guests have been, and I often do this. I try to put myself in their shoes and think, Bella, could you have the bravery to do that? And I have to admit, I don't know that I could for that river crossing. What was it? Was it scary? Like, did you know this was a thing before you turned up?
Yeah, so when we came to El Chalten, the little town that's close to the Fitzroy Mountains, we found out that if you want to do the hike that we wanted to do, you have to rent a harness, because you have to be able to tuck yourself in with a, what is it?
Hook and a carabiner.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, okay. Is that something that I can actually
you never tried that
before? I can do? I never tried it before, but so we did that. We rented the harness, and then we just had to see if it was something we could do. And then we came there, and it was just, the river was pretty intense.
Raging
it was a big river, and it was just like a little line that they had tied up.
Yeah, we
were
told it would be like steel wires. We trust the steel wire a little bit more, but this was a climbing rope that was a little bit worn.
Yeah, and we were like, okay, this is gonna be interesting. And I was also, we had cycled for 1.5 months, and it had been a little bit busy before. So my arm muscles weren't, kind of drag myself over a river.
On a rope.
That was intense, but it was totally doable, and
beautiful place.
It was a fun experience, and it was a little success to do that. Yeah.
That would give you such a confidence boost when you're thinking, because I think, we talked about experience that you had, Martin, and Katja, you built your experience as you went. But, these are the sort of things that when you come across something, you can reflect back on and go, oh, I did that, so I can do this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I traversed that track, so of course I can do this. It's no different to that.
Yeah.
Allowing yourself the impetus to be able to do it.
Exactly.
The good thing about traveling this way is also that you kind of put yourself in situations where you don't really have a choice, right? So you kind of just have to keep going. I mean, of course, I didn't have to cross that river, but if I wanted to stop and turn back, I would have to hike 2 days back to the hotel. So I was like, do I want to do it and get it over with, or do I want to go back for 2 days? And and that's the same on the bicycle up in the mountains. You just kind of have to keep going.
Yeah, push forward.
Yeah.
When we're talking about mountains there, well, obviously the Andes feature pretty prominently in this trip. It was really interesting for me to have a look at the route and the elevation maps that you put on your blog there, because it's so obvious when you hit those mountains. And it's so obvious when you descend down too.
Yeah.
And it's not like you hit them and you stay at a high elevation. It's sort of jagged heights. Like you were saying, Martin, you can be going up for 2,000-3,000 meters of elevation to get to that, 5,000 meter peak. What was it like from an altitude point of view, and knowing that you had days of hours and hours of climbing and descending ahead of you? Did it live up to those expectations? Was there a bit of trepidation about it? Were you excited to be there? What was that like?
Both. So I had the panniers with experience, so I knew how to prepare ourselves a little bit for the altitude. So we made a little bit of a game plan. So when we reached northern Argentina, we could see on the maps that we could arrange that we would slowly go higher and higher and higher and end up to that 3,000 to 4,000 meters, and that made us acclimatize for it, so that we could prepare ourselves physically for it, and then also just build up the confidence of cycling up there. But then, as you say, it's a jagged thing. It's not that we go up there, and then in Bolivia we more or less stayed up on a high plateau, because that part of Bolivia is a high plateau, but there's some mountain passes you have to cross. But then when we go into the high mountains of Peru, then the valleys, they are going east-west. And so you drop down in the valleys where the rivers are coming out of the mountains, and then you go up again.
Yeah,
and that was a daily experience of maybe 2,000 meters every day of elevation gain, and then going down again. So we kind of had to plan that a little bit. What we like to do is do half. So we end up on the half of going up, and then we sleep there. And then the next morning we only have a half one to start with, and then a good descent, and then go up a half one.
What an awesome strategy. Oh gosh, that is such a good hack.
It's not always that it works, right?
Can I ask though, did you ever get to halfway and go, let's just go to the top tonight?
Not too many times,
not
because
really.
then it's already late in the day, right?
You can tell the inexperienced one here has asked that question. Did you at any point in times have problems with altitude sickness at all, do you think?
Yeah, like there was one time. Normally we were pretty good at, like Martin
Managing.
said, we kind of acclimatized and make sure our body was ready for it. But one time our Garmin GPS, it played a trick on us, so it kind of stopped counting the height meters, but we didn't notice it. So we were suddenly much higher in reality than it said we were. And we were looking at our phones, and they said something else, and we were like, but we trust our Garmin more. What is happening with the phones? And that was actually on the way, like coming from a little village in Peru and then going out in Peru Divide. And then suddenly I started feeling a little bit bad, and I was like, it can't be true that we didn't go further, because I felt like we've been climbing like the whole day.
We checked our devices, but they were all not equal.
So we were like, okay,
on?
we'll just put our tent, and then we'll see. Maybe I feel better tomorrow, and we can keep going. So we put our tent, and then I rested a little bit, and I felt better. And in the morning, I was okay. But then we found out that actually we were like 500 high meters,
maybe 800,
higher than we thought. So maybe that explained like why I felt this way, but.
Because we're not just talking about 500 meters higher from sea level, like you're 500 meters higher from like 4,000 something meters.
So we were up in 3,000 something, and we went up to almost 4,000, I think. And that was a little bit too much in the day. So we even climbed more than we wanted to. And we got a little bit too high in elevation that we had planned. So it was a mix of things. We were pushing up the mountain because we wanted to reach a certain level to make that halfway point, right? But that halfway point turned out to be almost at the top when we figured out there was something wrong with the Garmin GPS that's showing us the altitude.
Yeah. And I mean, camping in those mountains must be just been magic. Like, you would have had magic moments every single part of the trip. In fact, if I was to just ask, did you have a favorite wild camping spot?
Through the whole journey?
Yeah. Now, what I will say is, when you're thinking of favourite moments, it's always the first thing that you think about. First thing you think about, that's the one.
I have a couple of, so one of them, or maybe all of our wild camping spots in Peru Divide, it was just so easy to find amazing wild camping spots up in those mountains. But also another one is, we camped on Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia, so the world's biggest salt flat. So we just camped in something that looked like a winter wonderland, but was actually just salt, because everywhere you saw was just white, and it was just
clear sky,
extremely
no lights
beautiful.
around.
The stars were just bright, and we could see the Milky Way so perfectly clear. And it was just that was amazing,
mind-blowing. I've been told by other guests that like your sense of depth perception pervades you when you're there. Like
yes.
You have none.
You have no clue on That would be bizarre. I think you can only know what that's truly like when you're there. Like, I don't even think I can perceive what that would be like. What about you, Martin? If I was, again, stupid, impossible question, but just what is there a wild camping spot, the first one that comes to mind for you?
I think there's one, and maybe we have a picture of it on our profile as well. I can't remember, but we were camping out in Argentina somewhere. In a valley, we went down and it's huge sand formations, and we found a little spot. We had to go through a fence because in Argentina there's a lot of fences. They fence the land a lot. But we found a way through, and we found a little area where we could put our tent, and the sun was going down, the skies were clear, and I walked up on the cliff and saw our little green tent with our little camp light down there, and it was just shining beautiful, and I liked that spot a lot. Yeah. Then we were cooking, and I lost half of our pasta because the handle went off, but that was another story.
Oh, no, devastating.
Yeah, but...
I imagine just quickly then on that point, when we were talking about riding in those high altitude things, I understand, not being able to go up too high too quickly because you need to acclimatize, and your riding style's different because your breathing's so heavy. So yeah, you might be going not too far between every time you need to stop and recover. Yeah. What about your appetite? Does that increase? Does it decrease? Did you notice a change in how much you needed to eat when you were cycling in those in that type of terrain?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So cold and altitude, they are ones of those that really makes your body burn calories like a jet engine. So for me personally, I tend to get very hungry, and I eat good at altitude also. Mm-hmm. But the little issue that we had is that the calories that are actually in the food that we could buy in the markets, it's not a lot. So we had to eat as much as we could, and we still lost weight. I probably lost 10 kilograms or something like that. And I'm not a big guy, so I don't have a lot to lose. But
that's exactly what I imagined it to be the case as well. But I wasn't sure. But I guess this is more a sensation. There's times where you don't feel like eating, but you're so calorie depleted. That's not a good thing to happen either.
We call it functional eating. So especially I'm used to it, but Katja had to get used to it a little bit. You are tired and you're not motivated. All you want to do is just get your sleeping bag out and just lie down and crash. But at that point, you still need to get that cooker going, boil the pasta, mix the stuff we have into it or whatever. And then just force yourself to get those calories in, because the next day you will suffer if you didn't do that. So it's type 2 fun kind of thing. You just need to get over it.
But I think it's mostly when I'm very exhausted, then I don't feel like eating, then I lose my appetite. Yeah. And then we talk about this functional eating, or in the morning, early in the morning, and you're a little bit sick of oatmeal because you've eaten oatmeal like every day for 2 years, but then you still have to eat that oatmeal because that's the food source that you have.
And there's no more sugar or whatever we put on.
Let's move away from food, which is a hard thing for Bella to do because I love talking about food.
Just have a little short addition because we want to go back to Sala de Uyuni. It's just fun when we talked about perception of things and out in the horizon. And actually what we did there, few days earlier, we had a message sent to one of our friends that we had cycled with, Jace from the US, and we had cycled sometime. And we knew that he was on his way to the Sala as well. So what I did is I sent him a coordinate of a place just in the middle of the Sala. We didn't know anything about where it was, just looked on the map, pointed a place there. And then we said, let's meet in 3 days. And then fingers crossed, we had no signal the next day. So and then we just rode to that point, and we had stayed with a family the day before, and they gave us some llama meat, frozen llama meat. We had put that in our panniers. So we had a little bit of food.
Bag of frozen llama meat, and that was like mainly the food we had left, because we didn't have much left. We had crossed a Bolivian desert before that.
And then out in the horizon, maybe 10 kilometers before we arrived to that point, we could see a little black spot in the horizon, and slowly we got closer and closer, and there it was Jace, our friend, standing with his tent already set up and his bicycle. And then we had like a reunion party on the middle of the Sala de Uyuni, and he had brought 2 beers because we were still cycling, and some vegetables, and we didn't arrange anything. So he had the vegetables, we had the meat, and he had 2 beers,
banquet.
And then we made a great meal, and then we had an amazing night. And of course we took some salt, and JT likes to make popcorn, so we put salt on the popcorn from the Sala.
Oh my gosh!
Imagine that.
This sounds so silly, but I've never thought of it in that way. But of course, you've got seasoning everywhere you're going along.
Yeah.
That's all river.
Never thought of that. Okay, I'm taking you away from the high mountains now. And something, again, when I was talking about the elevation profile on your route, something that's really stark is you really know when you've left the Andes because all of a sudden it just drops.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then for a few thousand kilometers, it's flat. I know.
Yes.
And that must have been some weird adjustment to go to. But if we were to talk about polarizing landscapes, we've talked about salt deserts and we're talking about the high mountain peaks in the Andes. I want to take you to the Amazon jungle because that to me is such a different scene. Again, another podcast guest, and it's one of her favorite places, is Lizzie Jenkins. She absolutely loves the Amazon and she spent times filming there and just loves the rawness of it. What about you two? What was it like to be in the Amazon?
It was just because you mentioned it yourself, like this, we just came from the high mountains. We had been up in the high plateau since northern Argentina. So we've been up in like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 meters. And then in a couple of days, we just went down to sea level to the Amazon, and it just got so humid and hot and green and lush, and the sounds of the jungle, like it's just every day, every night, it's just like these
intense crickets just like you
sound, like doodle, and we were used to just like very silent, very like nothing sounds, and it was a very, very intense experience to go down, and suddenly you can smell everything, because in the mountains, like up in 4,000 meters, like there's not that many smells. But when you come down, like suddenly there's smells, like there's
fruit,
much more fruits. Oh, the fruits. We love the fruits. Like mangoes growing on the trees, and people are giving you fruits every day, and bananas and pineapple. And it was a treat, because then like from cycling up in the mountains where you can cycle for days and there's nothing, like you go down to the jungle and you can cycle for an hour, and then again there's someone selling pineapples, someone giving you a papaya, so it was an intense experience, but very fun.
We arrived down to a city called Pucallpa. It's like a port city. It's a kind of big city in that standard, so it's busy, high rises. And then there's a lot of economy, so they do logging from the jungle, sadly. So they take out a lot of the big trees, but they also have oil business and a lot of. So this river is just like a highway of transportation. They're transporting big boats with beer into the jungle. It's a bit weird to see, but it's like houses of beer, crates stacked on each other with a roof on top, because they have to protect it from the sun, and all kinds of things are going on this river. So we came down from this very quiet, nothing going on in the mountains, tough riding, into the heat came like from, we were up in around 0 to 10 degrees in the mountains, or a little bit warmer with the sun. And then down in the jungle, it was 35 to 45, completely humid. Humidity was piling on us. We were sweating and wet, and camping in the tent. Everything was just so huge shift in things. But then we had to find a boat, because we wanted to go into the city called Iquitos. It's deep into the Amazon jungle. It's a huge city, 500,000 people in there. There's no roads going in there. Only river, or you can fly in. So that's how you get to Iquitos. And so we had to find a boat. And what you do is you go down to the river. There's a river bank, and it's just sand and river. There's not a formal pier or something where you can buy your ticket. You speak with the people. Oh, when is the boat going? Are the boat this one or the next one? And then you figure out, okay, that's the boat, and it's leaving either now or tomorrow, you don't know. And we found a boat, and we had to get our bikes and everything on that. So after 2 days, and then it was a 40-hour boat ride. We had hoped to find a boat that would take 3 days, because then it's a little bit slower, more comfortable. But this was 40 hours, 4 huge engines on this long boat, and we were full with people, maybe 50 or 80 people on the boat, and then just hammering down the Amazon River for 40 hours and stopping at villages, people in small canoes coming up from the village selling their bananas or rice. And it was an amazing experience going down this river. And then we arrived at Iquitos. It's just a huge city, and you find everything again. place to stay and
restaurants and
then
tourists.
and tourists. And
that was the first time in a long time that we saw other tourists. So
and we could speak with people in English, and and then we did a trip into the Amazon, a little bit arranged, but we slept in a place deeper in the jungle and went on night treks to see the tarantulas and all the things that you have in the jungle. and then we had a beautiful trip out of the jungle again and into Ecuador. And that was 5 days on the river again, the Rio Napo, which is also side river to the Amazon River, and going all the way up through with the villages and the people and finding a place to check out of Peru. And we had to pay a fine. We had overstayed a little bit, and we had to pay an extra fine because the money had to be brought to the office, and the guy who had to bring it, we had to pay for that guy.
We had to pay for his gasoline.
So
That's
all
the way
this
the country works.
So that jungle trip was an amazing shift from cycling and just being also, in the jungle.
And we had been in the mountains for a long time, and we loved the mountains, but it was also nice to have this change of scenery and change in environment. And
There's so many questions I want to get through, and I've spoken to you for ages. I feel like I need to wrap things up. But Central America, did you notice a stark difference once you then crossed over into Central America from South America? Was there much different? Did you notice big cultural changes? And I guess just quickly on that, in Central America, the countries are smaller and the distances aren't as vast. So do you notice those cultural changes with each country?
We do notice them, but just going back just shortly, because the transition from South America to Central America, there's no road connecting. There's a jungle piece, and that's how these two continents are connected, but you can't go through. It's a outlaw area, so we had to find a way. How do we get from South America to Central America? And there's a few ways. You can fly. We didn't want to fly. You can take a commercial boat where you go on a sailing trip and you pay a decent amount of money on that. And we didn't feel like that. So we found the local way, and we had to go with a boat where the migrants, because this is also an entry point for migrants. And that's an interesting point. Going to the US. So they go through Central America, Mexico, and into the US. So we were on a boat, huge boat with maybe 200 migrants. They were dropped off in the jungle. We had the opportunity to go to another little town where it's a little bit more tourist because we have a passport. And then our journey started out of Colombia, and we took 4 more boats to get to Panama. But this area was, the Guna people live out there. That's an indigenous tribe in Panama. They have given them authority to have their own kind of state, so they're autonomous. So they rule themselves out there. And
so they have their own political system. And
very interesting. So we spent a week out there with them, and then we entered into Central America, and then we got to Panama. And Panama is the center of economics in Central America. So it's the huge buildings and the huge cars and highways. So that cultural change was
massive.
Like crazy.
And so we definitely felt that we got closer to the United States, like more influence from the United States in these countries. For example, the cars.
Huger cars.
Bigger cars and...
A lot more transport. US goods going back and forth. Banana plantations like we haven't seen before. Ecuador also have big banana plantations. We didn't see them, but Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Guatemala, they all have huge banana plantations. All the bananas that we eat in the Western world, they're usually either Guatemala or Nicaragua, Costa Rica, all the ones we know. And so that was wild to see. And then, so the culture was, there were some subtle differences, and the language, there's some slang words, they changed a little bit, but not a big difference. The big difference came when we got to Guatemala and Mexico. There you have the Mayan cultures, which are still kind of strong. And this was, so Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, some small differences, and Honduras, El Salvador. But the big change got when we crossed from El Salvador into Guatemala, and the people again looked like indigenous people, and the languages, and they have also indigenous languages and all this. So there were some changes there, and very interesting, beautiful places and mountains. Again, you can see it on a route map again.
You can. It's so stark. You can tell when you hit a mountain range. You really do.
Yeah. So beautiful areas. And Mexico, we could have a podcast about Mexico another time.
Doing my head in, seeing how long this episode is already, knowing what I haven't been able to ask you, and I know I don't. So I might hold you to that. Maybe we can together again and fill in the gaps. So listeners, listen to this episode and there will be a part 2 sometime along the line. That would be amazing. Sure. Because something that I thought here is, and you mentioned it there, Martin, that it started to become American as you got closer and things of a different type of culture started permeating through. And in my imagination, a massive milestone would be crossing over into the US.
Yeah,
and then,
for sure.
And then I wondered, like, is there a huge culture shock that hits? But perhaps you already had that culture shock slowly permeating as you made your way through Central America.
It changes completely.
It was such a crazy change. And it was like a reverse culture shock, kind of, because suddenly you can get everything you want in the US. So we crossed at a border called I
forgot it now. It doesn't matter.
No. Okay, we crossed at a small border, but it was
in
an
Texas.
okay size city that we crossed into in the US. And the first thing we did was we cycled over to McDonald's and we got a burger. And because we just didn't, there were so many options for food that we were like, we can't make this decision right now. We just need something to eat.
Yeah.
Just gonna go for McDonald's. And then it happened that a guy, he came by our table and then he just put a $10 bill on our table and he was like, I admire what you do. And then he just left and we were like, oh, okay. what is happening here? I mean, so it was a big change. Everything was bigger and we went to Walmart. That's where you get your groceries. It was a huge supermarket and I had to go in, like Martin stayed outside with the bicycles and I went in there and I was like, I can't make any decisions. Like suddenly I had to choose what oatmeal do we want. And normally we could choose from 3 different kinds, but now I could choose from like 100 kinds. And I was like, okay, I don't know how to make these decisions now. It was very boring what I came out with because I just took exactly what we used to do in all the other countries.
When in doubt, default to type.
Not ready for it.
And actually those big supermarkets, and I imagine Walmart would even like dwarf we have in France, we have huge supermarchés, and especially compared to Australia, you sort of feel like you can walk forever. The cheese sections in some of the supermarchés in France could be a whole supermarket in Australia. And I'm over exaggerating a little bit there, but you get my point. But time goes really quickly. Like when you're the person that's going shopping and someone's minding the bike. I've done that with my husband before, and you know, it's like, I only need a few things, but you come out, it's like 30, 40 minutes later. It's like,
Yeah, and we actually got that day. It was also extremely hot because it was the heat wave. And this summer there was like
strong heat wave.
A very strong heat wave. Right when we were there, we rode sometimes in like 50 plus degrees. So the highest was 56 degrees. And it was like, we actually don't know how we survived it.
I don't know how you survived it. Let's just say you're not using 2 sleeping bags that night.
No.
None.
Just like, so going into the US was a day like that, like 45 degrees or something like that. And after Walmart and everything, we were just like, okay, we can't do it.
Deal with it.
So we found a guy that gave us a very good deal in a hotel. And that's one of the only times we've stayed at a motel in the US because it's too expensive for our budget. But we had to do it. We had to get some air condition.
And a Chinese buffet.
It's survival. It's no different to being hypothermic in a way.
Yeah, and deal with the change, from Mexico to the US.
Your end point is Vancouver. You reach Vancouver. And again, I feel like I've just so fast forwarded like half of your trip. But I would be appreciative to be able to interview again at some point and do that part of your trip justice. But you reached Vancouver just a few weeks ago. Your trip finished. A goal that you'd set years ago took almost 2 years to do. Has it sunk in?
No,
not yet. No.
We're still landing, but we had a really nice moment. So Vancouver has some like small fjords around it, and there's a bridge you have to go over. We came from the north, so we did a loop in Canada. So we didn't just go straight to Vancouver. We did a loop into the Rocky Mountains of Canada and all the beautiful places. It's for the next time we talk. But we came down and then we crossed over this called the Lions Gate Bridge, and Vancouver is just on the other side, and we have to go up there. And that moment when we are standing on the middle of the bridge, looking at Vancouver, it's then it's this imagining thing of going to Vancouver, and Vancouver was just a place. We didn't know Vancouver. It's a beautiful place and a nice place to go, but we just pounded it on the map because we thought that's a reasonable time and place to go. So, but then this place we've talked about for 2 years or even longer in the planning period is just right there. We're looking at it, and wow, it's an amazing experience. Yeah. And we looked at each other and kissed each other and hugged each other and said, "Oh wow, we made it!" And so that was an amazing experience. And then you ride into Vancouver, and then this project is finished. It's crazy.
Yeah. I cannot fathom that. And as you said, it was only just a few weeks ago. A trip like this, I don't know that it sinks in. I think the only thing that I feel for a trip this big is that you're going to have moments forever where a smell or a taste or a sound is going to trigger a memory of something that's going to be amazing. And it's going to be shared memories of both of you on this trip. Katja, you said at the start you had to go on this trip because you've just heard Martin talk about the big one. This is a big trip.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a worthy little brother, let's put it that way. And
for sure it is.
And you've got shared memories together. I just can't imagine something so much more heartwarming than that to share with your partner. I think it's just absolutely unbelievable. Okay, I do need to wrap this up, and I have a few quick fire questions for you.
All right.
Okay, 3 to go. Yeah. The first one. If you have to choose a soundtrack, a song to be the theme song for this trip, because I am putting a Seek Travel Ride playlist together, what song are you going to pick? I am allowing couples to choose one each.
Cool.
If it happens to be the same song, that's lovely. But what were you going to pick?
I think it's such a great idea with this playlist. So I got so excited when you introduced it.
Very good.
And my song is What a Life with Scarlet Pleasure.
Oh, I wonder if I know the song but not the name. But who was it?
Scarlet Pleasure. So it's a Danish band that made a song, but you might know it. I don't know.
There was a movie made, and that movie used it as a theme, and it won a few awards. So you might.
Oh, I will have to check it out.
It's an Oscar. And I'm gonna choose a song that's called "Horse with No Name."
I know this song.
Yeah.
There's a story behind it.
Yeah.
We mentioned Jace that we cycled with a little bit, that we met on the Salt Flat, that it's a song he introduced to us.
Yeah.
And we've been listening to it a lot.
Yeah.
And you know what, Katja, I was just thinking, you know how before I said you're going to have these moments where it's going to spark memories? You'll hear that song, you're forever going to think of Jace, and you're going to think of that moment on the Salt Flat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 glass questions. You know what these are.
Yeah.
Quick fire. Choice. You can cycle all day up a hill climb, or all day into a raging headwind. And I'm going to put a visual there. All day cycling up high altitude mountain pass in the Andes. Or all day in that Patagonian headwind. Which one are you choosing? Martin, you go first.
We've listened to your podcast before, so we know this question was coming. But the quick answer is, of course, the uphill. But I wanted to add an addition because actually there was the 3 weeks of rain and also some rain in Canada, and we would actually rather cycle in the wind than the rain. So maybe for your next episode, add the rain.
Season
rain. Every day cold rain, like 5 degrees to 0 degrees, and everything is wet.
Would you rather have cold and rain or a really hot headwind? I love it. What about you, Katja?
No, but I agree 100% with Martin. So I would I would rather have a climb than just like a flat road. Even without the headwind, I would prefer the climb.
Because it's more fun.
It's more fun.
Sisters of the soul here, Katja. I am exactly 1,000,000% the same.
Yeah.
A flat landscape does not thrill me with joy. No. Absolutely not. No. Okay. Final question to you 2 legends for sticking through this for so long. You have a choice one day to ride your bike for a mere 4 hours, but you can choose 4 hours to cycle on your own or cycle with other people. Now, when I ask this question of a couple, I understand that you like riding with each other. So when I mean other people, it doesn't necessarily mean with each other. Other people can be your friends. So what would you choose?
Any day, Jace, he's welcome to come along and cycle with us. No, we love cycling with people, and the periods we had cycling with friends along the way we've met is wonderful. But we enjoy our time as well. But 4 hours with somebody is always enjoyable. At least that's what I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. I would.
Oh, both of you in agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would rather cycle with someone than alone. But
Yeah.
Well, actually, and I realise this has gone so long, and this is just a quick question. Katja, for you particularly, you started this trip without long-distance cycle touring experience. You've ended with so much monumental experience. You could mentor so many people through it. Do you ever think that you would be curious enough to cycle tour? It doesn't have to be a massive trip, but would you ever do some cycle touring on your own?
I think I would do that. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to do
I
that.
want to do that. Yes. I have some plans, or I have some ideas. Actually, the most important thing for me first is just trying to do something on my own. So it could also be hiking, but I'm not sure yet what it will be, as we already made some plans, me and Martin, to do the next thing.
Every time you speak, I just think your solo trip is now episode 3 of the podcast.
That's for episode 3.
And maybe your next adventure together will be episode 4. Oh my gosh, we'll get a whole season out of you both soon. We'll have to just be podcast hosts together and just talk. We'll call it Bella's Campfire Chats with Katja and Martin.
Then we should do it around the campfire.
Yeah.
Monday, maybe with the rate that this podcast is growing, I'd love to host an event. People can come. We'll have a proper campfire and we'll have proper chat. Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah, we'll be there. Yeah.
I do need to wrap this up. Thank you both so much. I appreciate the time you've had. And listeners, I really appreciate the time that you've stuck out when you saw a podcast of this length land in your app and you click yes. I hope that you have been mesmerized, that you have heard these amazing tales and experiences shared here with Katja and Martin. My sense of wanderlust is off the scale and through the roof. Martin and Katja, thank you so much for getting in touch and sharing your story as guests of the show. Thank you for sharing the story here on Seek Travel Ride.
We thank you, and we thank you, our listeners, for making this possible. It's really cool. Yeah. So thank you very much for making this.
For having us.
Yeah.
I just have one word to say. Wow. Hearing Katja and Martin talk so enthusiastically about these beautiful experiences that they had, 22 months cycling, I am really looking forward to sitting down with them again sometime in the future and doing a sequel to this trip for them as another show for the podcast. For you, my listeners, a massive thank you. If you haven't done so already, make sure to hit follow in your podcast player app, because that'll notify you when new episodes like this are getting released. I release episodes weekly, and you can hear captivating stories from my guests of all the diverse bicycle adventures that they are having. Thank you once again. And on that note, until the next episode, I'm your host, Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.